today we're here to talk about the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration's new clearinghouse. Last year, employers, and Cheryl would dig into the details, but last year employers were required to register for the clearinghouse, and this year they're required to query for the first time. So Cheryl will share all that with us here in a moment. A little bit about Reliant Insurance Solutions. We are located throughout Iowa, particularly in Iowa City, Iowa Falls, Kelowna, Muscatine, and recently we've added Victor and Williamsburg locations. We do offer a wide array of insurance products, including personal and commercial lines, including auto, umbrellas, work comp. We do have a financial services division for group benefits, individual health, and such. And then we also offer value-added services, so loss control, claims administration, and HR resources. Many of you are familiar with those value adds through working with me, but if you ever have any questions or a need, please feel free to reach out to your agent, your customer service rep, or myself. Our speaker today is Cheryl Phelps. Cheryl's with CJ Cooper and Associates out of Hiawatha. They are a full service consortium and third-party administrator for drug and alcohol testing. They do serve both public and private customers, and they've been doing so since 1994. They assist in policy development, implementation, and management of your entire program, including some of the clearinghouses services that we'll be talking about today. They do have a nationwide network of collection sites, so they really can meet the needs of any company's drug testing collection needs. And they offer compliance expertise in DOT regulations and drug-free workplace programs, as well as screening devices for on-site screenings. And I will say Cheryl is my go-to person for DOT. I know just enough to be dangerous, but if I don't know something, she's very, very knowledgeable. She's a great resource to me, and I thank her for being here today. She's been with CJ Cooper since 2014, and in her capacity, she's worked with numerous businesses, both regulated and non-regulated by DOT, through her work at CJ Cooper. She also conducts supervisor training for reasonable suspicion. She does employee education on the effects of drug and alcohol. She's performed at conference workshops on these topics as well. And I've seen her speak, and I hope that you really take advantage of her knowledge here today and ask questions of her. She has been doing this, or she's been doing sales and marketing for over 25 years. And we are really excited to have her here today. So I'm going to turn the reins over to her. So give me a minute here. Okay, it's all yours, Cheryl.
Okay, thanks, Kristy. We appreciate being here. Let me get this going here. Yes, and thank you so much for inviting us, and we're excited about talking a little bit about the Federal Motor Carriers Clearinghouse. We are very close to the deadline for registration and queries. So as I go through this, you guys will probably understand where we need to be. So first of all, I know that Kristy did a little poll, and she had mentioned that a lot of you know a little bit about it. Some of you are not familiar with it. Some have registered, some have not. So I'm going to kind of cover the whole ambit of what our audience is today. So what is the clearinghouse? First of all, it is a database that will include any CDL driver that has violated the drug and alcohol testing program. Federal Motor Carriers decided that, hey, there's a lot of CDL drivers flying under the radar, and they're not doing their return to duty process like they're supposed to. They decided to put this database together, and they have requirements that employers need to check the database each time you hire somebody, and also do an annual query. So we'll get into all of that, but that's really what it is. And it's only CDL drivers. It's not your transit people under FTA, it's not railroad or anything like that, strictly CDL drivers. And what this will contain is just violation information, but it also will include some information on the return to duty process. And we'll go through that as we go through this. The timeline, very important. January 6th of last year is when this went into effect. We need to mandatorily report any violations, and also we need to do queries, and we're going to get into the details of those queries. Both you still need, as an employer, you still need to reach out to previous employers when you hire a CDL driver to check on their previous drug and alcohol testing violations, and of course their safety history and things. You still need to do that manually. You will need to do that for 3 years. And then you also need to check electronically, and that's what the database or the clearinghouse is. So once January 6th of 2023 arrives, you do not have to do the manual query of checking previous employers, because this takes care of that situation. So you'll only have to do electronic queries. So who's, I'm gonna move on. Oops, I'm sorry. The wrong button. Here we go. Okay, so who's required to use the clearinghouse? Well, drivers are required to use it in certain circumstances, and we'll get into that a little bit more in detail later. Employers need to use the clearinghouse and the TPAs, like a CJ Cooper. The medical review officers will use the clearinghouse along with the SAPs, or substance abuse professionals. In 2023, the state driver's license agencies will be required to use it. At this point in time, they're not required at this point. I think it has to do with the software, talking with other software. So registration, this is probably the most important thing you need to know today, because today is the last day that you need to be registered, and today is the last day of doing your annual queries for 2020. So we'll talk a little bit about the registration process. First of all, you need to create a login.gov account. As you're setting this login.gov account, I'm going to give some of those people that have not registered yet, I'm going to help you and make it a little easier. As it goes through the registration process, or as you do the login.gov, they're going to want a verification. So you are going to have a cell phone or some type of verification process. They know it's you as an employer signing in. So once they do the login.gov, you have that account set up, then you can go in and register. And this is just showing you a screen of how to get to the login.gov. You just need to register you as an employer. So once you've registered, or once you've logged in and set up an account under login.gov, then you can register in the clearinghouse. And as I mentioned, there's a couple of things I want to mention to those people that have not registered yet. It's going to save you a lot of time and headache during the registration process. First of all, they're going to ask you if you have a FMCSA portal account. Most people that we've dealt with don't have any idea what that is, or don't even know how to get into it. So when they ask that question and you don't have your login credentials for the portal, what you need to do is just say, no, I do not have a portal account. And then it's going to ask you if you have a DOT number. I'm going to ask you to say no, you do not, and that you will obtain one later. Those are kind of the questions they will ask you. The reason why I'm telling you not, or to say that you do not have a DOT number, is because if you say, yes, I do, it's going to take you back to that portal area, and they're going to have you log into the portal account. Well, you didn't know. You don't know how to get into your portal account. So it's a big headache. So you will be able to add your DOT number later, and I will show you that towards the end of this presentation. But for those people that haven't registered, those are the two things you need to know. Don't have a portal account and you don't have a DOT number. That way you'll be able to go ahead and finish your registration. And I don't know if we have any owner ops on this call. but they need to register also, and they can register as an employer or a driver. Drivers, there was some confusion in the beginning about this. Your current CDL drivers that you have currently employed do not need to register in the clearinghouse. Only time drivers need to register is if they're applying for a new CDL position, or for whatever reason they want to review their record, or if they violated the drug and alcohol testing program, they need to select a substance abuse professional within the clearinghouse. So that's only time drivers need to register. I've had some companies that say, you know what, I'm just making all my drivers register anyway. And that's fine. There's not a problem with that. So when a query is run and your drivers have registered, when you do your annual query, it will not pick up that driver's name unless they violated the drug and alcohol testing program. So you don't need to worry about that, but I just wanted to set that straight as far as drivers. Do they need to register or don't they? Owner ops, as I mentioned, I'm not sure I have any in this meeting, but if so, they do need to register. And one thing that's probably the most important for owner ops is they must designate a TPA to comply with the clearinghouse requirements. Otherwise, all other employers have the option. They can either do all these actions on their own behalf, or to do it themselves, or they can assign or designate a TPA, like CJ Cooper, to do all the actions on their behalf. So you've got two options. Some employers just want to do it themselves. Some don't want to deal with it and allow a TPA to manage it and handle it for them.
Hey, Cheryl.
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you take just 1 second and let people in that are in the waiting room? So if you go to the participants list at the top.
Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry, since I'm a host, I guess I didn't realize I needed to do that.
It's okay, thank you.
Oh, we got one more person waiting. Okay, thank you, Kristy.
Thank you.
Yep. So owner ops, that's kind of what you have to do in regards to registration and getting the actions in the clearinghouses and designating a TPA. So here's some frequently asked questions. Will every driver need to register in the clearinghouse? We already kind of talked about that. No, not a driver does not have to, unless, like I said, they are doing a pre-employment or signing up or applying for a new CDL position. Can an employer register their drivers? The answer is no. And really, it's because of the verification process. We want to make sure that driver that's registering is truly him. And like I said, the verification most people are using are a cell phone because they'll get notifications on their phone. Can an employer or MRO enter a drug and alcohol testing violation if the driver is not registered in the clearinghouse? And yes, the MRO or the employer / TPA can enter a violation on a driver, even if they're not registered, because it's all based on the CDL information. If you look at a driver in the clearinghouse, they're kind of their own entity, even though there is an association between the driver and their employer, but really the CDL driver is registering themselves. So they're kind of their own entity. So that's how that driver can move from job to job to job and not have to, worry about who they are associated with as far as an employer. And if a driver's on the road and unable to access a computer, how are they going to access the clearinghouse? Well, it is mobile friendly, so they will be able to use a smartphone. This came out December 10th, and it was the last reminder that employers must conduct annual queries by today. That's why you need to register first, and you'll need to purchase your queries, and we'll talk about that later, but you also need to run those annual queries. When we talk about queries, I'll kind of show you what that looks like. Here we are, queries. So once you are registered in the clearinghouse, you will be able to go up to this area called My Dashboard. That's kind of where you will be able to move around in the clearinghouse. You just hover over the dashboard, and then you can go down and do a few other things. One of them is a query. There's two types of queries. One is a limited query, and you can call it an annual query if you want. But remember, when you do your annual queries, you will need to make sure you have a signed consent form from that driver. I've got a sample of that in the next screen. If you are doing a full query, so for pre-employment, or if a limited query came back and said, this person is in the clearinghouse, well, then you have to turn and do a full query. So, and the only way you can run a full query is to have electronic consent from the driver. That's why the driver needs to register in the clearinghouse. Here's an example of what a consent form would look like for your existing drivers. The most important thing in here is you do have to put like a date, an end date, if you will. If you look at the last sentence here, it says this consent form is valid from the date shown below until my employment with ABC Company ceases, or I'm no longer subject to the rules. So as long as that CDL driver is employed by you, and you have this consent form, and it's good for however many years that employee works. So queries, there's a couple different queries, like I mentioned. One is a pre-employment screening. You'll need to do a full query on that, and that's why your driver needs to register, and you have to send through the clearinghouse. You need to ask for their consent to run a full query. Your annual verification, or your annual queries or limited queries, however you want to do it, this needs to be done once a year. So when we look at queries, limited queries, you're going to do that for your annual checks. What it does, it really just tells you if that person's name is not in the database, it'll come back and state no records were found. They're not prohibited from doing a safety sensitive function. Or you can do a limited query on somebody just randomly throughout the year if you'd like. That's up to you. And then the full query obviously needs to be run for pre-employment, or if you did a limited query on your CDL driver and it came back showing that there were records, well, then you'll have to do a full query, and at that point, that consent will be sent, or the request for consent will be sent to the driver, and then once again, he has to make sure he's registered. So those are the two different types of queries. If you run a limited query, so your annual queries, if everything goes well, you're going to see kind of the response over here on the left. It'll have that little green circle with a checkbox, and it'll say drivers not prohibited. So you're good. You've done your annual query. He's not prohibited from driving. So you're done doing what's required. If you do the limited query and you find the query complete over here on the right side, the yellow triangle, it's saying, hey, we found some information in here. So now you need to do a full query. A full query will give you more detail. It doesn't necessarily mean that the query driver is prohibited. It's just telling you that there is information in there and you need to look at it. As you can see, it says send consent request. You'll want to send that consent request to that driver. And that's why, or you may have to tell the driver to register if you've done a limited query and it comes back showing that you need to do a full. For the full query, as I mentioned, you need electronic consent to run it. That's why the driver needs to register. So this is kind of the screens that you will see as you go through the full query. You need to request that driver to give you consent. So then you send the consent request. And then it tells you that they've sent the request to the driver, and we just need to wait until the driver provides that consent. So what happens is the driver gets notification that they need to give consent in the clearinghouse. So they need to log in, They've already registered, right? So they need to log in, and then they will see here, query consents. He either can consent and allow you to continue that full query, or he can say, I do not consent. Now that's a refusal, and unfortunately, then that driver will be prohibited from driving. So it's like a refusal, a drug test, if you will. And this particular screen actually shows that this driver doesn't have any violations in the clearinghouse. So this probably was for pre-employment, just to give you an idea. So now you've run that full query. This is kind of the detailed information that you're going to get. It's going to give you an overview of the driver and all the consent information. And then it's going to tell you what violations there were. John Smith actually had an alcohol concentration of a 0.04 or greater. So that just kind of gives you an idea. So this really just tells you, you know what, until John Smith goes through the substance abuse or the return to duty process, you're not able to allow him to use his CDL for you or do a safety sensitive function. You can do a history. You can look and see what queries you've run or you've conducted throughout the year. This is just a sample of one of our customers. We did annual queries for them. They were completed. We didn't do any full queries because they didn't hire anybody throughout the year. And results, all 85 of them were not prohibited from driving. It tells you who conducted it, and you can look and see, might want to see for the whole year. So that just kind of gives you an idea. When you go to your dashboard and you go over to queries, you can then look at the history. So here's some questions. Can employers or their Ctpas query multiple drivers at the same time in the clearinghouse? So if you have 20 drivers, you don't want to have to type in 20 different names and do it individually. You can do a bulk upload. You'll need the actual template, and it tells you what to put in those in the template. You'll have to put first and last name of the driver, date of birth, CDL number, and state of issuance and all that. But it kind of saves some time if you need to do a bulk upload and do those annual queries. And they don't even have to be annual queries. They can be, let's say you're hiring 20 people. It could be a full query. You will need to purchase a query plan. So when you register at the very end, if you go up to your My Dashboard, if it doesn't ask you to purchase a query plan, you can go up to My Dashboard over to the query section, and it will then state there, purchase query plan or learn about query plans. I don't know of any company that we work with that would do the unlimited. You can buy them in bundles. Just remember that, let's say you have 10 drivers and you don't want to have to go back in every year to purchase a query plan. You can buy 50 of them and they will carry over from year to year. You do not lose them or they don't expire. So why do you have to purchase a query plan? Well, it's because you can't do any queries, either you as an employer or as a TPA, without you purchasing those. And the only way you can purchase them is through the clearinghouse. So reporting violations. See, there's your dashboard again. Notice the different topic areas, violations. There's your queries, and managing your TPAs or your profile is also an area that you can go into. But reporting violations. If you're doing the clearinghouse yourselves as an employer, there's certain things that you need to report. One of them is an alcohol confirmation, the concentration of 0.04 or greater. The reason why you as an employer or your TPA, designated one, the reason why you guys have to report this is because an alcohol test does not go through an MRO. And so those are the types of things that you would have to report. You also have to report any refusals for an alcohol test or a drug test. You'll have to report any actual knowledge. People always are confused of what is actual knowledge? Well, at the bottom of this screen, it's kind of gives you an explanation of what actual knowledge is, but in summary, it's based on the employer's direct observation of the employee. If you saw somebody drinking vodka outside their cab, maybe information provided by a driver's previous employer, a traffic citation for driving a commercial motor vehicle while under the influence, or an employee's admission of alcohol or controlled substance use. So if somebody's picked for a random and you tell your CDL driver, hey, you got to go in for your random test, and they say, you know what, I've got a problem and I've been drinking too much, or I'm doing drugs and stuff like that. That's actual knowledge. Now, if your driver comes to you without any prompting of like a random test, they just come out of the blue and come up to you and say, manager, I'm having some issues with substance abuses, and I think I need some help. That's a different situation. That is the 382.121, because if they are seeking help outside of a drug test environment, then they can't. There shouldn't be any repercussions when it comes to their CDL. So anyway, that's a different topic. I just wanted to let you know. And then also what needs to be reported is any negative return to duty test results. And then when somebody has completed their follow-up testing. So as I mentioned, employers or their designated TPAs need to report this information. MROs, they will automatically report any verified positive, adulterated, or substituted drug test results. And if they've determined that there's a refusal to test, and then if they make any changes to a verified drug test, those are what the MRO will report automatically. Even if you were doing your own clearinghouse violation reporting or not. And then the SAP, which is your substance abuse professional, they will report identification of the driver and the date that the initial assessment was initiated. So that's why the driver needs to go and register in the clearinghouse and select their SAP for their return to duty process. And then SAP also needs to determine the date of eligibility for that return to duty test. So those are the things that will be put in the clearinghouse. They won't put in, SAP will not put in follow-up information or anything like that. And I think that's talked about a little bit later. So what violation information do employers or their TPAs need to report? Well, pretty obvious stuff, your employer information, the driver information, what violation did they have? Well, it was a positive drug test. Reason for the test? Well, it was a random. The date of the test, and then any negative return to duty test results, and have they completed follow-up testing that was designated by the SAP. So here are some frequently asked questions. So will violations that occurred prior to January 6th of last year be reported to the clearinghouse? The answer is no. Everything starts January 6th of last year to date. How long is that violation information in the clearinghouse on that driver? It's in there for 5 years. Or if the return to duty process is beyond the 5 years, whatever's later, all that information will be in there. And will prospective employees' drug and alcohol violation history with other DOT modes be available in the clearinghouse? For example, you've got a CDL driver, but he also drives a commercial bus, transit type bus. So he follows the FTA rules when he does that on a part-time basis for another employer. If he tests positive under FTA, that information is not reported to the clearinghouse. It's strictly the testing requirements under the FMCSA. And can an employer or an MRO enter a drug and alcohol testing violation if the driver's not registered? Yeah, and we mentioned this before, and yes, it can. Will the employer be notified if a new violation is recorded on a previously queried driver? The answer is yes. They do a 30-day look back only for a full query. So you hire somebody today and you come back and it says they are not prohibited from driving. But he also works part-time for someone else. In another week, he tests positive for drugs. That will be reported, and then you will be notified. That new driver you just hired has a violation now. And if that's the case, you then need to run a full query on that new driver again. And then will the employer receive notification of new violations within 30 days of all completed queries? The answer is no. Get any notifications if you're just doing your limited or your annual queries. Only if you do a full query.
Hey, Cheryl. Cheryl.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep, I do have a question.
Okay.
Somebody asked, can a driver contest alleged drug and alcohol use in the clearinghouse?
Yes, they can.
Okay.
Another reason they need to register is so they can do that. I think I have a little bit of information on that in here.
Okay.
When we get to that slide, we can then go through that. I don't know off the top of my head all the details of it.
Okay.
But I think I have something in here. So
Okay.
I either have to go back to the driver's section.
Okay.
Or
Perfect.
Well, we can go back to.
Yep, we'll wait if we don't get to that. The other question, I've had 2 people ask, and I just want to confirm this, so they'll know that going forward. Somebody's asking to confirm that this is for new hires, not for current, because there was something in the beginning that I think might be causing that question to be asked.
Okay, so I what's the question?
Are the queries on new employees only and not existing employees, or is it on all employees, new and current?
You mean when it comes to queries?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, you need to run a query on every single driver.
Okay.
The limited queries are only required for your current employees, current CDL employees. So if you've hired anybody, that needs to have a full query. But any of your current, like on January 6th of last year, let's say you had 10 drivers. You need to run those 10 drivers through limited queries. Okay?
Okay.
Hire anybody else throughout the rest of the year, your requirement of your annual queries on those 10 drivers. Now, if you hire somebody new after January 6th of last year, you are required to run the full query. Once then that full query takes the place for the first year of their annual queries. So in other words, you hire somebody December 1st and you've run a full query on them. You don't have to run an annual query until, that makes sense?
Yes, I just think that there was something in the beginning that caused confusion, but yeah, I believe it makes sense, but people will let me know in the chat if they have further questions.
Okay, and we can go back to the beginning and see where that confusion started.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Cheryl.
All right. Let's see. Okay, and I kind of answered this question. Will a driver's follow-up testing plan be available in the clearinghouse? No. They don't have that detail in there. The SAP will communicate that follow-up program with the employer, and then that employer can share it with their TPA to set it all up if they want. And it's not tracked in the clearinghouse either. But if the follow-up testing, if somebody tests positive during their follow-up testing, then that needs to be reported as a new violation. And then the return to duty process starts all over. So, here's some miscellaneous information that I think will be helpful. First of all, as I mentioned in the beginning, if you haven't registered and you want to get through the registration process quickly, especially if you don't know what your portal account login information is, here is where you can add your DOT number after you've registered. Go to your dashboard, go to manage and click on my profile. It will show you at the bottom here, it says add your US DOT number. That's how you can add your DOT number later. If you determine, hey, I don't want to do this by myself, I want a TPA to do it for me, this is where you can add a TPA. Just go to your dashboard, go to manage, click on see TPAs, and then you can just start typing, I think, your TPA in there, and then a drop-down menu will come up and you click on the TPA is. Then you have to designate what actions you want them to do. You guys can do your own queries, but maybe you want your TPA to report all other violations and you want them to report your return to duty process or results. You can do it that way too. There's 3 boxes you would check if you want the TPA to do everything. Otherwise, you can pick and choose. People have asked, after I do my limited queries and stuff like that, do I need to print them out? What, all of that kind of stuff. You don't have to print everything out if you don't want to. You can go to your, let me see if I get back here. Yeah, under my dashboard, see where it says reports, and then it says compliance report. This is what you would get. You can then, all your reports are located here. So if you ever do need to print them out for whatever reason, you're getting audited or whatever, this is where you would find them. So your annual queries conducted, they would be listed here. Any pre-employment queries you've conducted would be listed, and then any violations that have been reported would be listed. So that's where they're all located. Here is my suggestion when it comes to doing this. Everybody knows when you hire a CDL driver, before he can perform that safety sensitive function, you need confirmed negative drug test. In your mind, put in there that you also need clearinghouse full query result that says not prohibited. Those are the 2 things you need before you let that driver drive. If you have a pre-employment packet you put together for your CDL drivers, I would make sure that the registration instructions are in there for the driver to register in the clearinghouse. He has to register because you have to run that full query, and he has to give electronic consent, allowing you to do that. And then I would throw in that limited consent form that I showed you earlier, because this will take care of any subsequent queries you're going to do in the future years. So just kind of a suggestion there. If you need more information on the clearinghouse, or you want to subscribe to any email updates, any of that, this is the website you'd want to go to, clearinghouse.fmcsa.gov. And then, of course, you can contact them via email through the clearinghouse.gov. I'm not sure how quickly they respond. Might be a little better now than they were a year ago, but anyway, so that's kind of what you'd need to do there. We can go back. If you guys have any questions, should we go back to that driver? Let me find that for you guys.
Let's do that. It was at the very beginning, Cheryl. Let's do that. And then I do have a couple other questions. So I think there was a place during the login. Maybe it was the registration. Does somebody want to help type in the chat where exactly they remember that was?
I've got a screen up here about the drivers when they register.
Okay.
Drivers may submit a petition to correct inaccurately reported information. So another reason that they would want to register, they could request the removal of the clearinghouse of an employer's report of actual knowledge, and then request that other reports of actual knowledge violations, such as failure to appear, refuse. So they can go in there and submit petitions and request changes, and I don't, honestly, I don't know what the process would be if somebody petitions something. I don't think we've had anybody throughout the whole year, a driver, want to do that. At least I'm not aware of that. Does that
Okay,
answer
great.
that question for you guys?
I haven't got anyone indicating that there's still confusion out there. If you do, please let me know. I do have a couple other questions.
Okay.
Will the clearinghouse share unsafe driving violations too, or is it just drug and alcohol related violations?
Just drug and alcohol testing violations.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bear with me. When do you mentioned reasonable suspicion training earlier? I think I mentioned that in your intro, as a matter of fact. Somebody's asking a question, when do I need to do reasonable suspicion training?
Okay. For CDL, for managers that manage or supervisors that manage CDL drivers, those supervisors need to have a 2-hour initial supervisor training for reasonable suspicion. That is the only requirement by the DOT. They only need to do the 2-hour initial. Now, if you continue to read about things, it will say best practice for those CDL supervisors to maybe have a refresher every 2 to 3 years, but it's not required. The only requirement is that 2-hour initial training.
Perfect. Another question I had submitted, can you confirm that this is only for employers with CDL drivers? For example, I have employees that drive commercial motor vehicles that don't require CDLs.
If that CDL driver is in a drug and alcohol testing program, and they're required to be in one, and those are the employers that need to register or to part of the clearinghouse. So,
Drivers who hold CDLs, okay.
yeah, because some people may have a Class C, and based on the commercial motor vehicle that they're driving, that's what determines whether that CDL driver will need to be in a drug and alcohol testing program.
Perfect. Got it.
I was going to say, I think it's pretty comfortable in stating anybody that has a Class A or B probably needs to be in the drug and alcohol testing program.
Perfect. Good. So Cheryl,
any other questions?
That's all the questions I've been submitted in the chat.
Okay.
So if people have follow-up questions, we can get those to you later.
Yeah, I was just going to get to the end here where I have all my information. If you need to call, email me, that's fine. Anybody has any questions? I will say we do quite a bit of the clearinghouse for a lot of our customers. I do want to state though, if anybody out there that's not part of CJ Cooper or we're not managing your program, it's very difficult for us to manage a clearinghouse for an employer without also doing the drug and alcohol testing program. The reason why is obviously when we do drug and alcohol testing, we have all the driver information. We have their name, their date of birth. We're supposed to have all the CDL information. So all of that is readily available to us if we're managing the drug and alcohol testing program. We see positive alcohol tests come through. We know about refusals, especially if they're at a collection site and they refuse while they're there, because that collection site will notify us and say, well, Joe Blow was here. His first sample was out of temperature, so we had to wait for the second one, but he walked out. So that's a refusal. So we would know that. So those are the things that make it easier for us to report violations on behalf of the employer. So I guess I just kind of wanted to put that out, that we can't just manage just the clearinghouse. It has to be both.
That makes sense. I actually have two more questions. Actually, this one question people have asked several times. Will you be able to share like a PDF even of the slides, Cheryl, so that people can have those to refer back to?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, if you could just send that to me, I'll send it out to the group.
That'd be fine.
And then somebody asked, once I register my 2 employees with this, does it put them into the random pool for testing?
Well, first of all, employers cannot register drivers. Second of all, by the employer registering or even the driver registering does not put them in a random program. You have to get a hold of a TPA, CJ Cooper, or you know, you want to do your own randoms yourself, but there's a lot of things you need to know to do all that yourself. So I don't think you want to venture into that bucket. But you do have to contact a TPA, put them in a consortium. Because if you only have 2 drivers, you want to put them in a random pool with other drivers similar in size of them.
Perfect. Right. Good. So if you haven't already, write down Cheryl's information. If you have follow-up, you can also contact her through me.
Just throwing this out there, so if there's any companies out there that wonder who CJ Cooper is and what we do, this kind of gives you a bullet point of different things that we can accomplish.
Perfect.
Okay, well, Kristy, thank you so much for inviting me and allowing me to kind of review. Hopefully everybody learned a little bit, but today is that deadline, so if you don't have anything else on your plate, you haven't registered, I highly suggest you go out and at least register and run those annual queries. You don't need your driver to register to do the annual queries. You just need to make sure that they've signed a consent form.
Perfect. If you'll go ahead and make me host, I'll just finish up on a couple of things on how we can support some of these folks in their efforts.
All yours, Kristy.
Perfect. Perfect. So I just wanted to outline some of the related services that we offer here at Relion to help you in your compliance efforts. We can help with things like developing and implementing fleet safety policies. We can also do safe driving training for your employees, whether that's giving you materials to do it or providing the service on site. We will be talking about the basics and the vehicle inspections in the next couple of weeks. I'll share that information here later. And then we can help coordinate some of these on-site trainings, bringing in Iowa DOT. My experience in the past has been some employers have found it very, very valuable to bring Iowa DOT's motor vehicle enforcement into their establishments and get them around a truck or a vehicle and show them some of the things that they're looking for when they're doing these roadside inspections, and just helping them understand DOT and how to manage drivers and so on. And those are services that the state offers for free. Trucking and DOT related resources as far as training. If you're looking for training materials, we've got it. We've got materials on securing truck cargo, some of the outlining some of the different basics which we'll cover in a couple more weeks here, but this is just a toolbox on the unsafe driving basic. It's important for your employees, your drivers, to understand what things that these motor vehicle enforcement officers are looking for when they pull you over. Hours of service regulations, we've got training materials on that, and appropriately winter driving safe practices for operators. Documentation. So Cheryl mentioned a little bit about documentation. We've got great resources here too. Guide to DOT vehicle inspections. We'll be talking about that next week. And then if you do hire a new driver, we've got a great packet of information on different documentation that you need to keep in your driver files, all in one easy little packet. There's a vehicle inspection report checklist, both annually and pre-drive. And again, there's a new hire quick start packet there. And then other general services from Relion that we offer on the loss control side is employee handbook and safety manuals. We can help you develop and implement new manuals, as well as review your current ones. We do fork truck certifications, safety training on abundance of topics, OSHA compliance, general safety, work comp best practices, whatever your needs are, we can develop a plan that works for you. And then facility and job site safety audits. We've been doing a fair amount of those lately, just helping you, giving another set of eyes on your operations, helping you understand where you might have risk exposures, etc. And then January is a very busy month here. We've got a lot of upcoming events. Most of you are aware that Cheryl was the first speaker in a 3-part session on federal motor carrier and DOT. Next Tuesday, we're going to be talking about those roadside inspections. I have an officer from the DOT that's going to talk about what they're looking for so that you guys can have these trucks buttoned up before you even hit the road, and make sure that you're compliant while you're out on the road. And then that should say Thursday, January 14th. Many of you may have received an email last night on OSHA's record keeping rule. They have some deadlines coming up that we want you to be aware of and keep you compliant there. And then Tuesday the 19th, I'm going to be talking about these basics. So the unsafe driving, the drug and alcohol violations, the vehicle inspections, and how to improve those scores, and why those scores are important. We'll be talking about all of that. I think it's very important for you guys to understand and know what some of this stuff means, who has access to information on you, etc. And then Wednesday, the 20th and January the 21st, we're doing an OSHA 10-hour construction. That will be a virtual 10-hour. So again, lots going on. You can go to our website and then hit the events page. You can register for all of these sessions. That's all I have. If you have additional questions or follow-up, I think most of you know how to get in touch with me. My phone number is there, my email. And I hope to see you all next week. I will send a link for the session next week here later today so that you can get registered for that if you haven't already. But thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day.